Welcome to DNA Clarity and Support. I'm your host, Brian. Listen as I chat with authors and leaders in the DNA world about the family and personal impacts of DNA testing. You'll hear news stories, unique perspectives, find out about books, websites, organizations, other podcasts for those involved in the world of DNA. Please be sensitive to younger listeners as the conversations can get intense at times. This is a production of Watershed DNA. Learn more at watersheddna.com. This is Brian, and on today's episode of DNA Clarity and Support, we have Michael Blair. Michael is a husband, a father, a professor of graphic design, and an NPE who has written a memoir about his experience. And he's here to talk with us today about that memoir. It's called I Had My Underwear On the Entire Time, a memoir of discovering family through genetic genealogy. And I hope we get a chance at some point, Michael, to touch on that title because it's quite interesting.
Well, good. That was part of the whole idea to get people, just to pull something a little catchy to pull people in.
Exactly. Well, it definitely worked. So when you were 18, your mother told you one day while she was vacuuming the house that your dad wasn't your biological father. So is that where your story begins? Did it begin before that?
It began before that. So when I was 12, it was during Memorial Day, and my mom and dad took me to the cemetery. We're looking at some gravestones of my dad's dad who had passed away. And he had passed away in 1973. And he was like, well, I'm sure, sorry that he would talk to my mom, that you and Mikey couldn't meet him. And the numbers didn't add up for me. I was like, hey, wait, I was born in 72. I would have met him, type of thing. So I knew then, and I started digging through their closet and found a very weird delayed certificate of birth. I didn't find any adoption records or anything, but yeah, I kind of figured it out when I was 12.
So you were around 12 when you figured it out, but you kept that a secret that you had figured it out for a number of years.
Yeah. How do you bring that up to your parents? It was just a weird, awkward thing. They've always kind of treated me as an outcast. I have two younger sisters. They were preferred over me throughout my life. So it was validating that way. But yeah, she was vacuuming the floor, turned off the vacuum and said, Steve, not your real dad. I'm sorry, Craig, it's not your real dad. And I just said, I know. And I was so shocked and angry at that time. I couldn't really form questions. So,
do you have any idea what prompted her that particular day?
I have no idea. I remember watching MTV. There could have been, I think Sinead O'Connor was on during that time. And I think maybe that sparked something. Who knows? Who knows what it could have been? So it's just some random spark, just like, oh, he's graduated from high school now. Well, I better tell him.
So maybe some milestone she had in her mind, but it's not anything that she ever shared with you later on.
Yeah.
In your book, you talk about how your adolescence was kind of a rocky time for you. And how much of that do you think you can attribute to the knowledge of your dad not being your biological father versus general adolescence growing up?
Quite a bit, growing up with it and having this kind of secret identity and having that identity issue. People have identity issues anyway, growing up, and especially that age. I felt very alone. I didn't trust people, and it was not easy.
At what point did you decide to start searching for the identity of your biological father?
Well, the search started when I discovered it. So when I was 12, every person I looked at on the street, it's like, are you my dad? Do you look like me? So yeah, it's been since then, but officially not until I was about 19 or so and had met my future wife. And she just really was encouraging and prompted a lot of questions, and which was great. So, she was very interested in it. So we just kind of jumped on the bandwagon and started hiring private investigators and tracking down any leads that we could find, which was very little.
I'm glad you brought up Amy because I feel like she's a really important piece of this story too. She was the co-author on the book with you. So I imagine she was there with you and helping process as you were writing your memoir. Tell me what it was like to have Amy there alongside you as you were conducting your search and the supports in your life.
She's very, very supportive and encouraging and pushy. So having that, and I need that from time to time. I get lazy and complacent, and having somebody nudge me every once in a while is a good thing. But she was the one that saw the commercial for Ancestry DNA, and it just popped into her head. Where she was like, "Oh, maybe he could find family this way." So we knew that was a kind of a thing, more ethnicity, which I was interested in. I was like, okay, this is one way I could kind of find out, what my background is or my heritage. But I didn't really think about family. So she was the instigator behind that.
I think that's a really common experience where people have an interest first in the ancestral background or the ethnicity information from a DNA test. And then when the power of the test to connect you with biological family becomes more real, then that becomes another goal, I guess. I don't know if goal is a good word to use. It becomes another goal or another option for you to explore more about the people that you're connected to.
Absolutely.
So when did your DNA test experience begin? And which company or companies did you test with?
So Amy was brining a turkey for Thanksgiving. And so that's when the idea popped into her head. And then she bought me a test for Christmas. So day after Christmas, I spit in the tube. I had my results back in February. So it was just and I got incredibly lucky and having an aunt that matched me. So that was, a very awesome surprise.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience figuring out who your biological father was amongst a group of, was it multiple brothers?
Yeah, there was 5 brothers, 5 sisters and 5 brothers in this family. And they were all kind of similar in age, and it could have been there was one that was pretty young that we kind of ruled him out first because he would have been only 7. So we're thinking, that probably wouldn't work out. But there's the older 4, we, kept looking, we were stalking them on Facebook and, just trying to figure out any information that we could. When we found a picture of my biological father, I knew in half a heartbeat. I was like, that's the guy.
You noticed the resemblance right away.
That was, just a visceral feeling I had. But, going through my bio aunts and having her be kind of the liaison between them all helped quite a bit. And we narrowed it down that way.
So since we're on the topic of your biological father, and you go into more details of that story in the book, but your biological father and his wife were not interested in connecting with you or sharing the news with other family. What perspective did you develop on that after talking to others in the family? I'm thinking specifically of like Carolyn and Maurice.
Right. Well, the weird thing is we started to connect at first, and we were talking. My bio dad and me were having conversations on the phone. Every Sunday we would talk for, like an hour, just get to know each other. And I would just end the call with, "Can I call you next week?" And he would say, "Sure." But he had to do it in secret. So he wasn't telling his wife. We made arrangements a few times to meet up, and then he would cancel. Then he was like, finally, I've got to tell my wife about this. I was like, yeah, you should. And that's when everything kind of went south. Yeah, she kind of pumped the brakes on that and wasn't on board for this whole situation. So things kind of ended that way. Also, he thought that maybe giving her a break over the summer would help her maybe calm down and maybe reevaluate later. That didn't help anything. I think it made it worse. But yeah, going through some of the other family members and connecting with them, it's interesting the fact that this family was already broken. And a lot of them
siblings and the 10 siblings in the family were fractured. Not your biological father and his family. You're talking about the extent.
Well, kind of both, but yes, the 10 siblings, 2 would be talking to each other and they wouldn't be talking to the rest of the gang. And there was always some rivalry going on and just a lot of drama, family drama. So going into that situation was hard enough. So yeah, talking with Carolyn was fantastic. She was the first one I actually met in real life.
Was Carolyn the biological aunt you connected with first, or is she someone you connected with later?
No, she's the one I connected with later. So she reached out after I connected with my aunt in Washington. Carolyn also found out and contacted me. And I was like, okay, sure. Yeah, I'll meet with you. And she's, just an hour away from me. So she was the first one I got to meet in real life. And she's been very, very supportive. Her and her husband and her family have been excellent. They've been very welcoming.
I'm glad.
And then Maurice would have been my grandfather's brother. So he'd be a great uncle. And he is just that. He's a great uncle. He will tell you anything in the world that you want to know, and just very open-minded and, a great person.
He seemed very wise, the way you described him and some of the comments that he made to you. Can you recall any of the specific things that he said that made you feel better about the situation?
Well, he would say things to the effect of, if your grandfather were here, none of this drama would be happening. And he would he would have gotten everybody on board. He would have loved you. And so that was very reassuring. And just knowing that and going in, and it kind of gave me a perspective of these siblings and what their relationship was. And, it's, that was kind of a cool thing.
So we've been talking about biological family for a little bit. I wondered if we could switch back and talk about your parents who raised you. And if you could talk about the experience of discovering if you could describe what it was like to find the adoption paperwork when your stepfather adopted you legally. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so I had went down to the courthouse, and prior to that, I had asked my parents, I was like, okay, was I adopted? And they were like, well, we think so. And it's like, well, what do you mean you think so? So I'm sure there was a judge involved, maybe some paperwork. Do you remember going through that? And my dad goes, well, yeah, I kind of remember going to court and filling out some papers. And I was like, well, do you have them? And he was like, no, they've moved so many different times that I think they just got lost in the shuffle. So yeah, going down to the courthouse and requesting the adoption records, I had to, say, I am not looking for my original birth certificate because I knew that was off the table here in Iowa.
Haven't things changed recently? I think Iowa just the latest state that has changed access to original birth certificate.
Absolutely. And
at the time, you didn't have access. Right.
Yes, it didn't happen. And I'll circle back to that later. Okay. But yeah, going to the courthouse and, filling out they were like, oh, well, you need to go talk to juvenile court, not to vital records. They would probably have the adoption papers for you. So I ran up there and filled out this paperwork. There was like 3 questions. And one of them was, why do you want this information? And I just wrote down, everyone deserves the right to know where they came from. So I submitted it, didn't hear anything for, a week or 2. And then I gave them a call and they said, oh, no, it's with the judge. I didn't think it was going to go in front of a judge and be, a thing, but it was approved. So they called me back like a week later and said, come on down and get your records. So yeah, going down there, and I had to leave a meeting. I was huge staff meeting at the school. Every employee was there. I just got up and left. I got the phone call and bolted.
It was that important to you.
Oh yeah, I couldn't make it. So, so I ran down there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's a big call to get. I understand why.
Right. So I ran down there and illegally parked, ran in and got the paperwork, and I was just shaking, just having that excitement and having that tangible proof that I existed, that somebody wanted me, was everything.
I remember reading your book, and that part of the book in specific, and tearing up a bit because you described the words that were used. Do you want to read some of what you read that day?
When I got the paperwork, it says, on this day, January 30th, 1978, this matter comes up for a hearing upon verified petition of the petitioner, Craig Ball Blair. The petitioner is the step-parent of the minor child herein, sought for adoption, and is qualified to adopt said child. Petitioner is disresist and able to adequately provide for, rear, and educate said minor child. We prayed for the adoption, and it should be granted. From this day forward, the minor child, Michael Lee Lang, will have the surname of his natural mother and adopted father, and be henceforth known as Michael Lee Blair. So it was a very complicated feeling. It was weird to have that, so much joy, and a lot of answered questions at that same time.
Yeah, I think complicated is a perfect word.
Right. Yeah. So, and then, kind of detailed my mom's story again in there. So it was her deposition, kind of went through the story that she's been telling me my entire life, which I didn't know if it were true or not. So her story never changed. So
her story never changed about how you were conceived.
Right. So that was very reassuring too. And, I've been mad at my mother for years and years and years. And that really was a huge Band-Aid.
I'm glad that you had that chance.
Yeah.
So for stepdads out there who are listening and are the father figure for their child, and they've always been the dad for their children, what do you hope they understand about the importance of their role in their kids' lives, even if there's no DNA connection?
I use the phrase, the people that show up are the right people. So the role of a step-parent is very difficult, and I have mad respect for anyone that has adopted children. Be prepared for questions, be honest, and just don't lie to them. Everyone needs to know who they are, and being a step-parent, they have a responsibility to aid in that search.
Do you feel like you were ever trying to replace your father do you feel like a sense of you're trying to replace your dad?
Not at all. And I think if you have a good relationship with your parents, this is not a replacement at all. Nobody is looking for that. Your adoptive parents love you, and, you got to accept that, and just, you're on a journey to find out who you are. So, that, the nature and nurture thing, it's a thing. The nurture, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes the nature wins out. So everybody has to know kind of who they came from and what their heritage is.
Love that. I like the ebbs and flows. Yeah. Nature and nurture. Amy, can I pull you in for some questions? Because you've been such a big part of this project too.
Oh, no, just a second. Okay.
I'm going to put you on the
I really wasn't planning on doing that. So, hello.
Hello.
No, you come back in.
You can
That'll be
sit side by
fine.
side. So, Amy, you were a big part of Michael's decision to do DNA testing and search for biological family, and you were there for him all along the way. Did you ever sense that Michael was kind of not ready for where he was on the journey, or do you feel like it was the right time for him in his life?
Well, when we first met and we were dating, he was 19 and I was 20. We were young. And he had just found, and his mother had just told him the year before, had told him, that when she was vacuuming the floor that day. And that, since I'd only known him for, a year after that, it was so fresh still in his hurt. He was really hurt. So I kind of fell in love, when we fell in love with a kind of a guy who was already going through a major identity crisis. So our marriage kicked off with this guy who was very, very unsure of exactly who he really was. And he questioned it a lot. And I said, if you're so questioning, why don't you just ask her? He really did not ask her a lot of questions in the beginning. And so we started a notebook. We wrote down some questions. He asked her some questions. She gave him the story that she stuck to, forever. Really, she just did not know his name. She could not recall this man's name. But I then said, your grandparents are alive. They met him because the guy had came and picked her up once, for a date. And she mentioned that. So then we took the notebook to Grandma and Grandpa's house and interviewed them. We got all sorts of information. We knew that she had put an ad out in the paper when Craig was going to adopt him. And we knew that there had to be an ad out there. So we would go and check microfiche, looking to see if we could find, was there a guy's name on there? Or was it just a John Doe? So there were lots of clues that we got through the process. We knew where he kind of was living when they, because he had taken her back to the house that he was living. We scoured, old Polk County assessors things, trying to see if we could figure out if anybody, could have rented that house or owned that house. Could they still have renter, information? We tried all sorts of weird things. It wasn't until we actually started having kids that it really started to, it wasn't so much me saying, do you want to try these things? It was him suddenly saying, I really want to know where he come from. Why does she look like this? What is she, our first baby had a very strange jaundice called Coombs jaundice, where the bloods mix, and she got very sick. And he was just like, is this, what else does she have that maybe we don't know that, these people have? And so that's when he began starting requesting his original birth certificate and finding out why wasn't he getting his original birth certificate? Why was it actually sealed? He was raised by his biological mother. Why was his original birth certificate sealed? That part bothered us more than anything. So we thought it must be that the guy's name is on the birth certificate. And maybe she's not telling us exactly the whole story. Grandma and Grandpa kind of had a, different take on something where they said that the man had came back when he was 5 years old and wanted to know if Diane had ever had the baby. And so he knew, because she said, I told him that I was pregnant, and he just took off. So there were just so many open-ended questions that we had that nobody could seem to answer. And then I'd get pregnant and I'd have a baby and it would start it all over again for him,
So becoming a parent was really a big trigger for you, Michael, to decide that it was time to search, because you weren't only responsible for yourself at that point, you were also responsible for your children and concerned about their medical family history.
Absolutely, yeah. I want to know what kind of bugs you got.
Yeah.
It was hard to watch him. And it was hard to get, we hired private investigators. We went and petitioned the courts. We went to state representatives to find out what we could do to change the right to know law before we even really understood what was involved with it. We had people looking in to see why the birth certificate was sealed. And everybody that would come back was just always, it was always bad. It was just, they could never give us a direct answer. Nobody could help us.
It's always been a mystery.
It's always been a mystery. And so even like that day, so it was 2016, in November of 2016 when I was buying that turkey. And I literally just was watching, I was filling my bucket up with water and I could see the living room. And I saw a lady come up on Ancestry commercial and I was, she was like, I thought I was Norwegian, but I'm Nigerian. And then I found a cousin who lives, 2 blocks away. And I was just like, what does she mean she found a cousin? And that's when I just typed in, can Ancestry DNA find family? And then I saw this whole thing. Adoptees are using it to find family. And so when he came up, I was just like, oh my God, I found a way.
Oh,
yeah.
Guys, it was like a door opened that had not been opened before.
Yeah.
Or hadn't even
it was just under the radar for us. We didn't even understand, even like when he spit in the cup and it came in, we didn't even know what we were going to see. And so we actually went to the ethnicity first and looked at that. And then we went to matches. And it was really late at night when we got it. And we saw that it said first cousin. And we thought that his aunt was going to be a first cousin. But I remember we were like, oh my God, this is so exciting. First, we got to go to sleep and get a good night's worth of sleep because it was so late. And
so
all
the
those
results came in so late at night.
25 years, seriously, of like trying to get this answer. And we see our first major clue and we're like, yay, let's go get a good night's worth of sleep.
Well, having done some family searches using DNA, you have to be well rested to really be able to start putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah.
Understand.
But I didn't ever think that he wasn't ready until we were like 6 weeks into the discovery. And then I started wondering if he was really ready. Because he started to kind of crumble pretty quick. And as the roller coaster of it happened, it was tough to watch. It was tough to watch as the demise, because as it ended, and he would reach out to his brothers and things like that. And it was almost like dealing with all of those people that we had asked for help before and got our door closed. It was like that again, except it was family, and I mean like close family, that was closing the door, and it just spiraled him. And so it's a tough thing to go through, even when you were the most ready.
Rejection is hard on its own, but when you're rejected by a parent and by your half siblings, it's triple hard.
Do you think that if you had worked with a therapist, it would have had a different outcome, or do you feel like it would have been the same either way?
I think it would have been the same either way. I'm thankful that I had counseling after the fact. That was amazing. I wasn't in a good headspace at the time. My therapist did help me a ton. And yeah.
For listeners who haven't connected with a therapist yet, could you share a little bit about how you found someone to work with? Because that can be the hardest part, finding your way to a counselor or a therapist.
Well, I started off with my primary care physician, and she suggested somebody that worked in their clinic. So I met with this therapist who I think graduated the week before. She did not know how to help me. And she basically told me, she actually wrote me a prescription to drink more water as I left. So the first one didn't go well. So yeah, you do have to kind of shop around and find somebody that has the credentials and kind of knows a little bit about what's going on to help them. I found somebody that had a MDR experience. So we did some exercises that way. So that was helpful too.
So it started with primary care, but then you did some searching on your own later to find someone that was a better fit.
Yeah, and
listeners, I'll also put a link in the show notes that goes to a site that has a list of counselors and therapists that specialize in the area of supporting people with a misattributed parentage experience or not parent expected discovery. So it's mpecounseling.org. And that list has just come available in the past couple of years, that group of therapists. So that was not available at the time that you were looking.
Correct. Yeah.
So you had the support of Amy, you had the support of a therapist, and then there were some people in the family that you reached out to and in the family around you that were there with guidance. So it kind of struck me that Carolyn and Maurice, they really stuck out as the ones who seemed to get it in a way that other relatives didn't. Could you tell us a little bit more about these two people and how is your relationship with them now?
Relationship with them now is wonderful. So they're very open. We meet up often. Every couple months we get together. Probably the aunt that I matched with, that's the strongest relationship I have throughout this whole process. So her and I have a lot of similar traits. And so we just gel immediately. And, I've been out to Washington a few times to visit her and her family. They've been crazy supportive and has helped me tremendously. But yeah, Carolyn and Maurice, they are also just fantastic people, very open, very welcoming. And I am so thankful for them.
That's great. Let's talk about the resources and supports that mean a lot to you. What about your work on right to know legislation and the Adoptees Coalition of Iowa? What led you to become an advocate and what kind of work do you do with them?
I would say counseling support groups help totally. The NPE fellowship has helped quite a bit. I've been doing some sensory deprivation techniques and meditation, acupuncture. So tried a lot of different things that have really helped me out. But for the right to know, I've had a former student who was an adoptee who did not know who her biological parents were and was on her search, on her journey. So we started talking. She started heading up this the coalition. She's the one that started to advocate for birth records to be unsealed in Iowa. So I've helped her out quite a bit, especially my story. So having an adopted father and living with my birth mother and not having access to my original birth certificate, I think really kind of tipped the scales and pushed some people over to our side.
So what happened in Iowa, in the state? Was it 2020 that it changed over?
Yeah, so it's been up for discussion every year for 25 years. And it kept getting tabled or stalling somewhere. And finally, in 2020, we got enough people to support it and to write their congressman. It does work. And to just share stories. And like I said, my story helped out quite a bit in convincing some people that it needed to be passed. So it's still a little
Write
weird.
Your congressperson, is that important point for adoptees and that live? Write Your Congressperson is an important.
Oh, yes.
People who live in states where there's not yet an open access law.
Yes. Advocate for yourself and write your congresspeople and, got to convince them. I mean, the change starts with you.
So telling your story for the purposes of helping to advance right to know in the state of Iowa, is that what led to your story becoming a book? Do you think that's where it has its origins, or was the book started before that?
Not at all. So, along the way, we documented quite a bit. So we had a lot of research already done. When COVID-19 hit and we were in lockdown, we just just decided to write it all down. It took 6 weeks to write down, and we wrote it and we put it away for 3 months, and we didn't look at it. And then went back, read it again, and then started editing. And that took about 6 months to do.
You should feel very proud of yourself for telling your story publicly. I know it's not easy to do that. So I hope you do know that it's appreciated by people like myself and other people who will read the book.
I'm not doing this, I didn't write the book for, fame and fortune by any means. It was, to help other people and just to share my story. I think the hardest part was telling my parents that I wrote a book about this. They weren't exactly thrilled.
Have your parents read it yet? Or they just know it exists?
My mom has read it. My dad won't read it. So he said he doesn't want to be mad at me. I was like, you're the hero in this whole thing. You come out good in it. Why don't you sit down and read it?
Well, the fact that you still have a relationship with your parents, and I think that goes to show a lot about the kind of person that you are. And parents that are having kind of a rocky time in adolescence with their kids, hold on hope that.
Well, one thing to think about too is people put their parents on a pedestal, and you got to realize that people are, parents are humans. They make mistakes. Things happen. Humans have sex, and they make babies sometimes. It's you got to kind of keep that in mind when when you're in your dark space, and just like, okay, maybe I'm overthinking this, and look at the bigger picture.
Look at the bigger picture, and there's always a light at the end. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Michael. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you to Amy for popping in and
no problem.
Playing along. I put you on the spot, but you did a great job.
Well, thank you for all that you do.
You're welcome. Thanks for listening to today's episode of DNA Clarity and Support podcast. Head on over to watersheddDNA.com to learn more about the resources and support available for those involved in DNA discoveries.